We have at least 2 really big Red Sox fans running for Cambridge City Council today. So we only have 3 folks on this panel. What we'll do is the same format. I'll bounce around between questions. We'll start out with the 2 minutes, the 2-minute introduction, and we should go. It's so that everyone. So let's see. I got to get my phone out. Let's introduce our panelists first. We have Kristen von Hoffman.
Hi.
We have Mr. Marc McGovern and Kelley, who are all running for City Council. The question that we've begun with in each panel is to ask, what are the most important energy and environmental priorities for Cambridge, and why do you think so? And we will begin with Kristen. Can you tell us?
Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. I think the most important energy and environmental issues we have are 3. The first one is setting very clear standards for greenhouse gas reduction. So we currently have energy reduction goals as a city, but we don't yet have specific goals around certain greenhouse gas emissions. I think we need to identify that and then strive for those goals. Secondly, I think we need to create a comprehensive sustainability plan that takes into account various factors such as open space preservation, energy reduction and greenhouse gas reduction goals, traffic and sustainable transportation goals, and several other components that I would describe as being interconnected. And thirdly, I think we need to increase awareness and education around climate change for our city in particular. So the city of Cambridge is currently undergoing and working with various organizations on climate change mitigation studies. And I personally believe these are fantastic studies because they look very closely at areas of Cambridge that are most vulnerable to things like flooding. And I think we need to raise awareness around those issues. When I've been knocking doors, many people don't realize that they live in vulnerable or sensitive neighborhoods. And I think the more awareness we have, the more education we have on these issues, the more support we'll have for finding solutions to these problems. So I would describe, again, those 3 issues as being the most important in terms of environmental and energy topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we're going to hear from Mr. Marc McGovern next, but I just want to point out that Mr. James Lee has joined us. Thank you very much for getting here. So Marc and Mr. Lee, for your benefit, you have a 2-minute opening a question about what's the most important energy and environmental issues you see for Cambridge, and we'll hear from Mr. McGovern now.
Thank you. Thank you to all the hosts and for all of you who are sticking through this tonight. When I signed up for the 3rd panel, I didn't know it would be Game 6, but there you go. So I'm going to actually just start. I'm going to be very straight and honest with you. I am not the environmental expert in this race, but I'm smart enough to know that. And I'm smart enough to know that I need to surround myself with people who are. And I need to, I'm a social worker. I surround myself with people all the time who are experts in areas where maybe I don't have the expertise. And so some of these questions, I'm not going to dazzle you with figures and numbers, but I want to make sure that you know that doesn't mean that I'm not interested or care about these issues. I have 4 children, the youngest of whom are 3 years old. I care deeply about what this world is going to look like for them, and that these issues will be a priority for me should I get elected. So with that said, and not to, I would say, similar to Kristen, education is hugely important. I am on the Cambridge School Committee now. I want to see more environmental education in our schools. Kristen has done a great job with her role in the Cambridge Public Schools with educating kids. So educating not just residents and adults who obviously need to know more, but how do we raise the next generation to make sure that they are fighting for these issues and they're aware of these issues and they're making the changes that are going to need to come in generations to come. So that's one. Solar energy, I'm looking at a little bit of what Boston is doing around having goals for having X number of houses have solar energy over the course of the next couple of years and giving residents incentives in order to implement and to have solar energy. That's something that Cambridge could do, and we could certainly look at how can we encourage people and help people move towards solar energy in their houses. And then I would talk about open space preservation as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Craig Kelley.
Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Craig Kelley. I'm a city councilor now, and with your #1 vote, I will continue to be a city councilor in the future, I very much hope. I'm going to separate this question into the two parts. One's energy and one's environmental. They are related, but they're not the same thing, and we often conflate the two issues. So for the energy discussion, I think that it's important that we focus on what makes sense. And for a lot of people, solar makes sense. For a lot of people, ground source heat pumps might make sense. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to be efficient, however that efficiency is managed. And that's what's going to make us more competitive. It's going to stabilize our prices. There's a whole school of thought that having self-sustaining energy systems is good for the economy. It's good for business investments. It localizes your money. It may need some incentives from the city, and we've talked about that in terms of the Net Zero Task Force and the Connolly petition discussion. But that's sort of separate from environmental. So environmental, and Kristen mentioned the vulnerability assessment we are currently doing, and it should be done at the end of this month or end of December. And then another 18 months of planning to address the issues brought up in the vulnerability assessment. And we need to realize it's a changing world. And 5.5 hours off and Hurricane Sandy would have done to us what it did to New York. Preparing for that requires another different but related look at our energy systems. It requires the thought of islanding our energy. It requires the thought of having places be self-sustaining for X many days before the systems can get up and running. We have a 21st century economy that is built on wooden sticks. And that is something that you only find out when the trees fall on the lines and you're out of power for 2 weeks. That's not really sustainable. So we have to look at energy not just in terms of energy efficiency and production, but in terms of how it handles the environmental risks, the environmental changes that are undoubtedly coming at us. We don't know when, but they're coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And finally, we'll hear from Mr. James Lee. And the question is, what are the most important energy and environmental issues you see for Cambridge?
Right. Thank you so much. I apologize for being a little bit late. I tell you, it was not because I was watching the World Series. I was not watching the World Series. I was feeling kind of sick, actually, but I am glad that I'm here, and thank you so much for sticking around until the very end. It really shows who really cares about the environment. So kudos to everyone here. So I'm James Lee, and I just want to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running. This may have something to do with the environment, but I mean, I care deeply about the environment, but a personal reason why I am running is I have been living in Cambridge for many, many years, since 1995, but I just became a citizen of the US only about 2 years ago. So I really care about all the people living in Cambridge who are not citizens. I feel like, as you know, Cambridge has people from all over the world. And I feel that I can speak for them because I went through the process of actually becoming a citizen. And I have traveled all around the world, and I've seen the harmful effects of what you might call environmental degradation all over the world, especially in many parts of the world, where people live in poverty. So poverty and environment are actually two issues that are very much deeply linked. So I think one way to solve the problem confronting Cambridge is we have to help those people in Cambridge, who need help. I'm talking about people who are living in the so-called low-income category. People who need affordable loans and assistance from the government so that they can actually do the home repair and the home improvement projects that they are actually able to afford to improve energy efficiency in their homes and so forth. We need to do everything we can to help these people to save the energy bills and at the same time cut down on the carbon. I can tell you that I stand for things like using alternative and clean energy. I'm talking about solar, wind, and so forth. And I agree with my colleagues that we have to come up with a plan to prepare Cambridge for future emergencies like what happened in New York when the superstorm Sandy struck, and And people who suffered the most from Super Sandy, from Sandy, were the people in the low-income category, people who, who really need help.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Well, again, a very interesting panel of talented and well-spoken. Cambridge is very fortunate to have such a select group of people running for their city council. What I'd like to do now is to begin with questions. Again, you can refer to your handouts. Will be in the open space, the open urban space section of it. And I'd like to address the first question to Ms. von Hoffman. And the question is essentially the following. It's in category 3 on the Charles River. It says, how can the city and the state work together to improve the parklands along the Charles River? Do you see any opportunities for a synergy there where Cambridge can work with the state to do that?
Yes, absolutely. I think the synergy between the city and the state, pretty much in any category, but certainly with regard to open space preservation, is critically important, and there's a lot of potential for us to work together with the state even more comprehensively. I think working with DCR and with other conservation groups will be part of that. The Charles River Conservancy Group is another organization that I would bring into the conversation. I think we can do a lot with the Charles River as well in terms of education, so trying to encourage more of our student groups and schools to get outside and be in nature. I would also broaden this topic to mention the Silver Maple Forest and Alewife Reservation and other places of great open space, like my personal favorite, which is the Silver Maple Forest and Fresh Pond, where I often walk my dog. But again, I do think there are a lot of potential opportunities for partnership. I think one thing we need to keep in mind is what are our goals as a city in terms of open space, and how do they align or not align with what the state has in mind. Also with regard to procuring funding and looking at financing of open space areas. So there's a lot of potential, particularly with regards to financing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you mentioned the Silver Maple Forest. Our other panelists should be prepared to answer a question on that as well. Let me ask another question. This is for Mr. McGovern, I guess, as it works out. What would you do to balance funding between creating open spaces and having affordable housing? How do you combine those? What's the connection that you see?
That is, these are the tough conversations and tough decisions that we have to make as a city and as a community. I was speaking to someone not too long ago who wanted more low and middle income housing, more open space, more parking, but didn't want us to build anything over 4 stories. These are tough conversations. We are a small city, we are a dense city. If I could redraw the map of Cambridge and help make us have more space, I would, but I can't. But I don't think, and this is something that where we benefit, is that we are a financially stable city. We are a city that can do a lot, and I don't want to get into either or thinking. And I think there are many creative things that we can do. I mean, you look at rooftop gardens, you look at, how do you incorporate open space into new development? I mean, there are certainly things that we can do to help balance that. So I don't think it's necessarily either or, but I'm not going to tell you that it's not an incredibly complicated issue for the map that we have here in Cambridge. I mean, it just is.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question will go to Mr. Allen. I'm sorry, Kelley, if you forgive me, Mr. Kelley. Question has to do with Cambridge is blessed with several beautiful open spaces in a natural setting. One of them is the Silver Maple Forest that Ms. von Hoffman referred to. Can you tell us a little bit about what you would do to preserve that and make sure that it's there in the future?
I was at the Silver Maple Forest on, I think it was Saturday. I actually saw a couple of deer there, which I thought was really cool. But we ought to remember that the Silver Maple Forest itself is primarily not in Cambridge. And the challenge we have in dealing with land that is not in Cambridge is how do we convince Cambridge taxpayers to help pay for it. I have long advocated that we ought to work with Arlington and Belmont and put money on the table and say this is what we will do to preserve this. If you go through the Silver Maple and you see those trees, you realize that as insignificant as it may be globally, it is hugely significant locally. It is really a magical place, and you can get there by foot from anywhere in Cambridge if you walk long enough, and you can get there easily by T. But it's not going to happen for free. I have advocated, and when I say advocated, I mean suggested to people. It's not like I'm out talking to lobbyists to make this happen, but I've advocated perhaps bonding as well, but it's not going to come for free.
Thank you. The next question we'll pose to Mr. Lee, and it is this. What additional measures do you think, would you propose that the city of Cambridge take to help improve the water quality within the Mystic River and along its boundaries?
Well, you know, I must say that I don't really know a whole lot about what can be done to improve the water quality in Mystic River, but I do know that the water quality in Mystic River is definitely much worse than the water quality in the Charles River. So that's definitely something. This is an area that we definitely need improvement, and we must make sure that the harmful pollutants they do not seep into the Mystic River. We must do everything we can to improve the sewer and the drainage in the system so that harmful pollutants, they do not seep into the Mystic River.
Thank you very much. So now we will move to the section of the questionnaires, or the questions that we had that have to do with green buildings, the built environment, and sustainable systems. And one of the questions there that I'll ask, and let's see, I'll mix it up and ask Mr. McGovern to answer this. Can you please tell us, have you been able to review the Net Zero Task Force mission, and do you think that process has gone well?
Yes, I have. I can't say that the task force process has gone well because it hasn't really started. But what I will say is, in terms of the Connolly petition, I do think the task force is the way to go. I've said it at all these forums. I agree with the goal of net zero. I appreciate the people who filed it. I've met with many of them. They're far more, they're the experts on this far more than I am. And I appreciate their filing because they forced a conversation that should have been happening. And that's sometimes what you need to do. But sometimes leadership is saying, we need to take a step back and make sure we do things right. And that's part of the job of being a city councilor, is to make sure that you're bringing various people to the table to have a conversation so that when you do move forward, you move forward in a way that's going to get you to where you want to go. Now, I think having the recommendations come in take a year, I think is too long. I don't think it needs to be a year. I'd like to see that half of that maybe. But I do think the task force is the way to go because we need to explore this and avoid any unintended consequences.
Thank you. The next question is for Ms. von Hoffman, and it has to do with building energy labeling. And the question is, do you support the City of Cambridge adopting a building energy labeling program? And what impact do you think what consequences might there be of such a building energy labeling program?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by building energy labeling, but do you mean setting standards for energy use for a building?
It's an examination of it's an assignment of an existing building of its energy efficiency, so that a new buyer knows what it is, or someone who's moving into it.
Great. Yes, I fully support that. As many of you know in the audience, I'm the sustainability manager for the Cambridge Public School District, so measuring building performance is part of my daily job. I think that it's critically important to be able to know how much energy use and what the finances are, and what the carbon output is of any building. So I'm fully in favor of labeling our city buildings, and even beyond that, if we can get corporations and businesses to participate. That way we can track energy use and we can set clear goals for energy efficiency and energy reduction. That's what I do every day for the schools.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next question is for Mr. Lee, if I could ask you. How do you think the city of Cambridge is doing in enforcing the anti-idling laws, especially around high schools and in high-traffic area like the various squares? What would you do to improve the enforcement of the anti-idling statutes?
Yeah, I do know that the anti-idling law has not been vigorously enforced, and that is bad. We must do everything we can to make sure that the law is enforced, and to do that, we, as a city, we need to work with the school systems and the various trucking and delivery companies that use these large trucks and so forth to make sure that they are not unnecessarily idling their cars. And one way also to attack this, not just to attack this, but also to save on fuel and cut down on carbon footprint is we need to work with the trucking and those companies so that they will be able to rationalize the routes that are used for delivery, so that in other words, so the cars will not be covering extra miles when they don't have to. Yeah.
Very good timing. Right on schedule. This question is from Mr. Kelley, and it's a rather specific question, but it touches on a bigger topic. So you can, in your 60 seconds, you can expand on that. But the question is, would you support having the Inspectional Services Department in Cambridge enforce the commercial recycling ordinances when they conduct other inspections? So that touches on a whole series of commercial recycling questions.
Yes. I think inspectional services is the enforcement arm of a whole lot of things in the city. Sometimes the License Commission enforces things as well. And then when it comes to noise, the License Commission, oddly enough, does the enforcement when it's really an inspectional services issue. And the city needs to, I think, be more aggressive, and I've said this forever, about putting enforcement authority, equipment, and training in the hands of inspectional services for what is rightfully inspectional services, and that way the License Commission can focus on what it does, which is licensing restaurants, checking out the temperature of food and stuff like that. When you confuse who is supposed to be doing what, oftentimes things don't get done correctly, and I think the noise ordinance and lack of enforcement thereof is a perfect example of where the city sort of tried to split the difference, and the result is, and I would feel the same way about recycling, the result is we don't have the right people doing the right job, and it's not getting done properly.
Excellent. Thank you. I just want to check with the four candidates. We're all squared up, right? No one's missed a turn.
winning.
What, you're winning? But everyone's had a chance.
I'd like the idling question at some point if you can. I actually
Okay,
did
well, maybe we can
something
get back. There are several formulations of that, so maybe I can ask you that. But let me start with Ms. Van Hoffman again. The question is, what other cities in the country do you see as a model for Cambridge to try and emulate in terms of environmental and energy issues? And why?
This is a great question. I'm excited to have it. I think we can point to several different cities in the United States, San Francisco, Denver, and I would say Maryland. In Maryland, we have a few districts, at least in terms of school systems, that have done a great job around sustainability. But I would point to San Francisco as a leader in terms of how it's set up its policy and with regards to various components of sustainability, including recycling, energy, transportation, job growth, and tying in the economic piece to sustainability. I would also expand that to Europe. When I'm doing research in general that relates to traffic, transportation, and certainly building energy standards, I often look at what's happening in cities across Europe, in Germany, in England, Denmark. So I think it's a lot broader than the United States. But I would say a key component that San Francisco has done really well is they've shown the economic incentive behind sustainability, which is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. So this next question goes to Mr. Kelley, and it's a little bit of it's not a hypothetical question, but I recently heard about a company that was doing basically pickup and delivery composting. Right? They'd pick up your compost and drive and take it away some pure compost and bring it back to you later on. It did not easily fit within typical licensing models because it was an innovative new business model. The question is, what can Cambridge do to support these new business models in terms of licensing or regulation, or to support those developments?
In terms of composting, the city is starting a pilot program in North Cambridge and Avon Hill next year with about 800 households to see how the city could manage that. In terms of innovative things, our zoning code is archaic. We have this idea that we've got a table of uses and you can do X in a Res B but not in a Res C1, and you can do Y in a industrial A1 but not in a Res B. And technology has changed all that. We've seen that with Uber. We've seen that with the Cambridge Innovation Center. We've seen our ability to share resources much more effectively than we have in the past. But our licensing, and sometimes it's not at Cambridge's level, sometimes it's at a higher state or even a federal level in terms of what can be shared. We need to be much more aggressive about embracing that new technology and sharing the resources. When it comes to traffic, we don't really have a traffic problem. We have a resource problem. We have enough empty seats in every car every day to put anyone that wants to go anywhere, but we're not making it happen. The city council couldn't pass a zoning amendment to allow Zipcar in residential areas. So we need to really rethink how we're looking at technology.
Thank you, thank you. So what we'll now do is switch back to the topic that we began with several hours ago. We'll return to the questions on climate, and we'll pose those to our panelists. What I'd like to do is to ask Mr. McGovern the following question. So,
Sorry.
no, that's okay.
Distracting me. Just trying to get in my head.
Try to psych you out. As a city councilor, how would you engage with underserved communities to make sure that they are active participants in the conversation on climate change, including the threats they face to their homes, livelihoods, and the opportunities they have for green jobs?
It's a great question. We get it at almost every forum on whatever the topic is, because community engagement, particularly for certain populations in Cambridge, is something that we have been banging our heads against the wall for a long time. On the school committee, I can name the same 15 people that come to every meeting and speak, and it is not a representation of the diversity of our city. So one of the things that I did on the school committee, and I would certainly support and do and push for on the city council, is I increased the funding for an organization, a program that we have called the Community Engagement Team. This is a team of people who are from minority communities, who speak the language, who live in those communities, who are from those communities, who the city hires to go out and reach out to people in those communities to inform them about what is happening in the city and in the schools, to bring them to meetings, to encourage them to come to meetings. This is a program that is working. It's something we already have. I tried to get I got $15,000 in the school department budget. There's a $154 million budget, and I had to fight for $15,000 for this. But this is a program that works. So how do we expand that? How do we get people on the ground who are in these communities, part of these communities, who can go out and actually talk with people who they trust and bring them into the process, because we are not representative of the people who really live in this city.
Thank you very much. The next question is for Mr. Lee. So, sir, here's my question. What can the City Council do to encourage, support, and enable emissions reductions by both the residents, this is greenhouse gas emissions reductions, by the residents and businesses in Cambridge? And what initiatives would you take as City Councilor?
I mentioned this when I was giving the opening statement. You know, we must make available low-interest loans and so forth, so that the poor and the low-income households are able to actually afford energy efficiency improvements. You know, so that the city will be able to help them to seal their windows and so forth, and save on the energy bills and so forth. And for the businesses, we must do everything we can also to give them the kinds of low-interest loans and the various economic incentives. I think the key is that we need to do a better job of engaging with the business community so that they will come to agree that that working to save the environment and working to improve energy efficiency is actually in their own economic interest. Environment and economic development are not two opposing things. They actually work together.
Thank you very much. The next question. I feel like we're marching right along with questions. I hope the next question is for Mr. Kelley. And it's this. What additional measures would you take, what additional measures should the city take in the next 2 years to increase our resilience and prepare for climate-driven emergencies and disasters?
The city is almost, as I said earlier, finished with its vulnerability assessment. That was an 18-month process. After that, it's going to be an 18-month planning process. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I have this thought that public safety, which is really what we're talking about here, is a much bigger sphere than policing. It's DPW, it's inspectional services, it's fire. That needs to be crowdsourced. We can't look at the city or the state police or anyone else to keep us safe in times of emergency. We have to do it ourselves. And I think that, and I've tried to have this discussion as chair of the Public Safety Committee, and it's going, but slowly. The public safety people need to realize that we are a team on all of this. And you only have to look to the marathon bombing. When people came out of the house an hour later, someone said, hey, we found the guy. This is something we do together. It's not their job, it's all of our job. And I think that we have to continue having this discussion of how do we do it together, how do we crowdsource it, how do we build communities that are resilient with each other.
Very good, thank you. And the final question goes to Ms. von Hoffman, and it's this. What do you think that our fair city can do to impact regional, national, or even international levels of decision-making as it relates to global warming? What's the one thing that could be done in Cambridge that would have the most consequence?
I think the net zero buildings is a huge opportunity for that. I guess I want to take this moment to say there are a couple of issues that I think could make Cambridge really stand out as a leader nationally and internationally. And I understand that in politics and with regard to public policy, we have to be thoughtful. I get that. And I'm very thoughtful, for example, in my daily work as well. However, climate change is a new type of issue that collectively as a society, as a city, we have not encountered before. In other words, there's a sense of urgency and a timeline around issues with regard to climate change that require bold and immediate actions. For example, passing a net zero amendment that would allow us to create net zero buildings. For example, preserving the silver maple forest, which Friends of Alewife Reservation has worked very hard to do. These are things where we need bold leadership. It's a timeline and we're running out of time. And so as your councilwoman, that's something that's at the top of my agenda. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've come to the end of our discussion. I want to thank our panelists for excellent and well thought out answers. I want to thank everyone for hanging in through the evening and participating tonight. I want to congratulate the City of Cambridge on having such a great city council because when these folks are on it. So thank you very much, good night, and we'll talk to you again.